So welcome everybody. Hopefully this is not your first Michael's Community Classroom class, and if it is, hopefully it will not be your last. I do want to make sure to remind everybody to keep your microphones on mute throughout the class. This is not like, if you have to ask a question, do ask it in the chat. That will be perfect for us. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces here today. So welcome, you guys. As Ali said, my name is Marley Bird. I have been working with Red Heart for the last 5 years, and now I am an ambassador for Yarnspirations Yarn. I am a knitting and crochet instructor. I do have my own YouTube channel where I teach both knitting and crochet. We've been talking a lot about jewelry lately and dabbling in some other stuff. So if you like what you see today, you can always get more from me over at the Marley Bird YouTube channel. But I love teaching these Michael's Zoom classes. They are so much fun to do. And we will be moving right along today throughout the instructions. I'm assuming that you have a general idea of how to knit. So this is not a beginner knitting class by any means. Hopefully you do know how to knit, you know how to purl, you know how to cast on, you know how to bind off. We're just taking a little bit of a step further, and we're going to talk about the instructions to make a really fun knit market bag. So we will talk about all of the stitches today. We will talk about any tips that I have, maybe about picking up stitches or working in the round or whatever it may be. And if there's something you need for me to repeat or whatnot, again, make sure you ask in the chat so that way Ali can let me know. All right, so there are quite a few of you here, and I want to say hello. I am going to open the chat as well so that I do have it up. Fair warning though, I cannot look at it the whole time, so that's why I have Ali here. All right, so I'm gonna have you go over to my hands and we're gonna dive right on in. Okay, y'all, so this is actually the pattern we will be doing. Let's see, continue, right here. So this is the Knit Market Tote, and this is a free pattern available at yarnspirations.com, and I know that Ali is going to probably provide a link, or there will be a link provided at some place for you to get this. So you can follow along with this right now with me or later on, either way works. Right down here, just as we're going to refer back to this pattern quite a bit. You can see the materials list. For this bag, you will use Lily Sugar and Cream, and it will take about 6 balls. And if you haven't seen Lily Sugar and Cream, this is what it looks like right here. So this is not the beach glass color, obviously. This is sage green, but I like this color, so I just pulled it out of my stash. Along with the yarn, you will need a pair of size 6 or 4mm circular knitting needles. Now you probably saw that I had some straight ones here, and that's because my circular ones are already in use preparing for the body of the bag. But we make this bag in 2 pieces. So I'm going to show you how to make the bottom flat on some straights because they're not worked circularly, they work back and forth. But if you don't have a bunch of needles and you need 1 pair just to get through the whole thing, 1 pair of size 32-inch circulars will get you through the whole thing. You will also need some stitch markers and a tapestry needle to weave in your ends and to sew the piece together, okay? So when you look at patterns like this, you can see up here, they give us a skill level of easy. And that means there's not a whole lot of extra construction or anything that goes on with this bag. Basic knitting knowledge should get you through this bag, but that's a really good place to start whenever you're wondering, could I do this, could I not do this? We have a list of abbreviations here, which are always important in every pattern you ever look at, because the abbreviations for this pattern might not be the same for the next pattern you do. So don't just assume you know what an abbreviation is in the instructions. Always go back and look at the abbreviations in the pattern you are using. I'm not going to worry too much about gauge for this pattern because we are making a bag, but gauge, all that means is the designer had this many stitches and this many rows to get 4.5 inches, and your goal is to try and do the same to accomplish the same size bag. We start off with our instructions right down here, and I want you to note that it says tote base. So we make the base first, and we actually bind it off or cast off, and then you make the body. And then when you make the body, we have a page 2, you cast off the body, and then you cast on for the straps. So this bag is made in pieces, and then at the end, you pin the tote together, and then you sew it all together at the end. I'm not certain why the designer didn't make it so it was all in one piece. You probably could change the pattern up to make it one piece, but we're not going to go over that today. We are going to follow the instructions as they are written. All right, everybody with me so far? I'm going to start off right down here where it says tote base, and I'm going to cast on 29 stitches. So I'm just going to set this down, and I'm going to use a different color yarn because because my needles are green. And I mean, I did not intend for my yarn and my needles to match, and so I don't want that. It makes it hard to see. So I have changed to blue yarn for this portion. Those of you who have taken my beginner knitting class and such know that I usually, when I teach beginners, I teach the knitted cast on, but for this, I'm gonna work with the long tail cast on because that's the one I use all the time. I really prefer it to a lot of the different cast ons that are out there. Can you guys hear me all right? I just moved my microphone over to make sure. All right, cool. So I've put a slip knot onto my needle. I have guesstimated about how much yarn I need for the length of my tail. You could always take your yarn and wrap it around your needle the same number of times as you will do for the number of stitches you need, and then give yourself a little extra room and put your slip knot there, and that usually gives you enough yarn for the tail. We want to put the tail over our thumb. So I'm going to put the tail over my thumb, and I'm going to put the working yarn over my forefinger. Okay, can you see how I'm just like this? I grasp the bottom parts down here just with my loose fingers, and I create a slingshot. So I want to create some tension, and I have a slingshot here. It's at this point, I'm going to take my needle, go to the base of my thumb, scoop up my thumb, swivel around to the tip of my finger, go down my finger, and I have this little window right here that's created where my thumb is. I want to scoop swing, I'm going to say swing. I'm going to swing my needle through that window and let the yarn come off of my thumb, pull the tails, and I have a cast on. Then I readjust and I do it again. So here we go. I get in my slingshot. I go up my thumb, down my finger, through the window, off my thumb. Readjust and apply again. Up my thumb, down my finger, through the window, off my thumb. And you guys, if you have a different cast on that you prefer and you don't want to do the long tail cast on, you don't have to do this. I prefer the long tail cast on because it gives me a really nice secure bottom right down here. It gives me a nice flexible cast on. It's very easy to work into my stitches on the following row. It's just my preferred cast on. I think it is so much easier to work into, and it gives you a row of knitted stitches. Like if I were to kind of flip this over, you can see those are the purl bumps on the back side. So I'm casting on some knit stitches, but I don't really like to say that because that gets people confused with the knitted cast on. This is the long tail cast on, and I really enjoy doing it. And there's a way to do this particular cast on if you want to do cast on like one knit, one purl, one knit, one purl. There's a lot of variations to it, but it's a really great cast on to have. Oops, sorry, hold on. I had a phone call come in. Did it come? Am I good? Is it popping back? What the heck? Are you there? Yes?
Oh, I think we lost you on your hands.
Oh no, okay, hold on, give me a second. I'm not sure what happened. Let me grab my phone. My phone is acting funny. It kicked me out of the meeting. Let me try again. Sorry, you guys. Don't know what happened. Okay. Talk amongst yourselves.
No, I see a lot of people here talking about like differences in the cast on. I know I didn't know there was anything besides a long tail cast on for about a year. I thought that was the only way you could cast on a knitting. So I know I love it. I definitely love it. And I'm always afraid of running out of yarn. So I will use way too much yarn for my long tail cast ons all the time.
Right.
But it does, compared to some other cast-ons that I have since been taught, I find it a lot more just like sturdy. I
agree.
guess that's my opinion. Um,
I agree completely. I think it's a lot more sturdy. It's a lot more flexible as well. It's really fantastic. All right, so my hands are back on there. Tyler, hopefully you're able to find them and make them work. I have them listed as Marley Bird in one of the comments. I'm so sorry, y'all. I don't know what happened. I got a phone call that came in, and I don't know how, because I thought I had everything turned off. But so that's awesome, right? That's a first. All right, here we are. We are back. So we're back to the cast on. So we have a nice flexible cast on. You just readjust your hands and you get a cast on. See, I just gave you guys some time to get caught up with me, right? That's really where we are. So let me count how many I have here. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. So I need 29. So we're going to do 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Now you can see here I have like a little bit of tail left over. I'm totally okay with that. Actually, if you wanted to pre-plan that you had a lot of tail left over, you could use that to help sew your bag together. Just a little tip there, but you can see here, so that is the base of my bag right now, okay? And I will go ahead and turn my work. And it says that I'm supposed to purl 2 rows. Now we know how to purl, so we're gonna go ahead, grab my needle here, and I'm going to purl. And I'm going to try and purl with the yarn in my right hand, but my preferred method is my left hand, so I will be switching to that eventually because I'm not exactly pretty here. But you take the needle, you put it into the stitch from back to front, yarn over your right hand needle, and then pop that stitch out and off. In, around, out, off. In, around, whoops, around, out, out, and off. You see that? Okay, so I'm gonna hold the yarn in my left hand. It's my preferred method. I feel frazzled. Oh my gosh, I feel so frazzled.
Don't feel frazzled.
I know, but you know how like it feels like you get cut off your game and then it's like, okay, what am I doing? I saw a question pop up about smaller circular needles. Could you use those? Yes, you could use smaller circular needles. Just know that as you cast on the 180 stitches for the body of the bag, they might be really snug. So that's something you have to pay attention to. And you will see here, as I'm knitting with the yarn in my left hand, I'm still going through the same motion. I'm going into the stitch just like I did before. I'm going around the stitch just like I did before. And then I'm coming out the stitch just like I did before. And just holding the yarn in my other hand. I was a crocheter before I was a knitter, so this happens to be just an easier way to hold my yarn, because when I crochet, I hold the yarn in my left hand also. So it just seems to be very convenient for me to do so. All right, how's everybody else doing so far? Did we cast on some stitches and then purl a couple rows? Not too bad. And if you aren't doing that right now, if you're just watching and paying attention and then thinking you're gonna go back and watch this later, you can absolutely do that. I really hope you're enjoying yourself and having a good time. All right, when you get to the end of the row, you will turn your work and we have to purl one more row. You can see here, that's what my stitches look like so far. How we doing?
We're doing good. Pam Walters wanted to know if you have tutorials on continental knitting on your YouTube page.
I do. They're not like super in-depth like classes. It's very much like, here's how you knit continental, here's how you purl continental. Really, that's it. But then more than that, whenever I teach any of my knitting stuff on YouTube, for the most part, I'm working in continental, with the exception of if it's an absolute beginner, I do try and either show the English style or both methods. But usually I'm always using continental. So sometimes just watching somebody work through a pattern and work through stitches holding their yarn continental really helps, especially if you're a visual learner. Um, and so that's actually how I learned to purl. I used to watch a show called Nitty Gritty, and there was a woman on there who was showing how to knit socks, and she was purling, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's how you do it. And I just mimicked her. And so that's how I purled. And then fast forward like 7 years later, you guys, I got to meet her in person and tell her that she is the reason that I am now a knitter. She was like, seriously? I said, yeah. So kind of a fun little thing there. All right, so I just purled my 2 rows. So let's take a look at what our pattern says. So when you're looking at the pattern, it'll say the first row. So we purled 2 rows. Now we're on row 1, which this will be our right side. So they're counting this as our right side. It says we're going to knit 1, and then we will see that star there. That star, it's probably really blurry. Is that better, guys? So we have knit 1, and then you see this star. That star is important. I'm gonna explain why here in a second. Then it says you will knit 1 more, and then we're gonna slip 1 as if to purl with the yarn in front. Then it says repeat from star to the last 2 stitches and then knit 2. So that means we'll go back to where the star is. We'll knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. Knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. Knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. We'll keep doing that all the way until we get down to the last 2 stitches. So whenever you see a star or an asterisk, always pay attention to that, because that gives you a clue of, oh, that's where I'm going to come back to repeat whatever pattern is across a row or a round. Okay, so I'm going to set this down and we will continue. So we will start off here. Get some more yarn. Everybody following me? Can you see it? You see it all right? Okay, so I'm going to knit 1. And then this is my repeat. Knit 1. You can see. And then it says slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. So I'm going to bring my yarn between the needles to the front, go into the next stitch purlwise, and slip it. Then I bring my yarn back to the back, and I will knit 1. Bring my yarn back to the front, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, bring my yarn back to the back, and knit 1. So you really are moving your yarn back and forth just like you would if you were doing ribbing, only instead of purling this stitch, we're going to slip 1 purlwise and then bring the yarn back to the back and knit 1. And remember, when you bring your yarn back to the back or to the front, you always go between the needles. Slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, yarn between the needles to the back, knit 1. Bring your yarn to the front, slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in front, bring your yarn back to the back, and knit 1. I'll do this with the yarn in my other hand so you guys can see there too. All right, so this is where I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, slip 1 with the yarn in front, purlwise, yarn back to the back, and knit 1. Yarn to the front, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, yarn to the back, and knit 1. Pretty meditative, right? I mean, meditative, and you kind of get this really cool look here. My stitches are falling off my needle because I'm dropping my needle. Let's get down to the last 2 stitches of the row. All right. All right, so to the last 2 stitches, this is where I would just knit my last 2 stitches. I am right-handed. Somebody asked if I am right-handed or left-handed. I am naturally right-handed. All right, you see that? So that was row 1. We turn our work, and row 2, we just purl. So we know how to do that. So while I'm just purling along, why don't I ask you guys a question? How long have you been knitting? And are you an English knitter or continental knitter? or want like maybe Portuguese or a combination. What is your preferred style of knitting? So let us know in the chat. Let's kind of hear what's happening over there. I'm just going to purl across all of these stitches. Portuguese. I knew there'd be a Portuguese in here.
Knitting for 50 years, Ronnie.
50
That's amazing.
years. That's amazing.
English for over 50 years of knitting and crocheting.
So many. Look, I mean, look at this across the board. You know what? This is one of my favorite things about knitting and crochet, Allie, is it brings people from all walks of life at all levels of learning together. And it's a place that we all can come together and create and agree and just have a wonderful time together. Like, I love that about this craft so much. I mean, look at the diversity in this room, you guys. Look at all these skill levels and who taught us. I mean, this is amazing. I love it. So many of you. Welcome, all of you. Okay, so I've hit the end of the row, so that's the end of row 2. So I'm going to turn my work, and let's take a peek at what our instructions are, because we want to make sure we're doing this correctly. We can see here on row 3 that we have a star now at the beginning of our row, but we're going to knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front again the whole way, and we will finish with a knit 1. So it's very similar to the first row. It's just we're shifting where our slip stitches are. So put that back over there. Here we go. I'm going to start off over here. And I'm going to start off with my knit 1. Read my yarn between my needles, slip 1 with yarn in front, and then continue on. And while I'm doing this, you'll find this is very rhythmic. You start to not really have to think about it. I will let everybody know, when I first learned to knit, I learned from one of my very good friends who is literally one of the best knitters I know. And she is from England. She is from Newcastle, England. And she knits with the knitting needles underneath her armpit. It's a stabilizer. And then the other needle, so it's like this, you know, and she knits like that. Like, it's very fast. She has the yarn over here, and she's very fast. And when she tried to teach me, I'm not really a small girl, and I'm busty, and my needles were not long enough. And so I was like, I am running out of room here. There has to be another way to knit. This is not working for me. And she was like, well, I'm not really sure. And she was stumped because that's how she knew how to knit. And so it was my pastor's wife, actually, who said, Marley, you're a crocheter, right? And I said, yes. And she said, let me show you how to knit continental. And I said, well, what's that? And so she showed me. And it was like the Matrix aha moment, you guys, where like everything became very clear. And it was like, oh, I see it now. That's what it was like when I got the yarn in my left hand, just like when I crochet, and the needle out of my armpit. And so that's my learn to knit story. It's kind of interesting there. But since then, my friend, okay, so hold on, I have to purl this row. So since then, my friend who tried to teach me how to knit English, because she had always knit with the needle in her armpit, she had never really used double points before. And so she'd never made socks. And so I taught her how to use double points and to make socks. And so now this is what she does. She uses her double points, and she rests it like this in the middle of her stomach, but the point of the double point, she rests it like on a patch of leather. So it still holds it in place. It's just no longer underneath her armpit. But, you know, she gets it done. She makes some fabulous socks, but it was kind of neat that I got to show her how to do that. So anyways, there's your story time for today, ladies and gentlemen. Allie, how about you?
So I taught myself to crochet one afternoon about 6 months after I started working for Red Heart. And I just sat there on the couch and taught myself. And then it took me a while, but a coworker at the time, she taught me to knit. and I knit continental.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable crocheting. So continental was kind of like a little bit of a natural fit for me.
Hmm.
Um, but I love it. And I feel like most of you, since the pandemic started, I have been crafting so much more. So,
Hmm.
so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. So here we are, guys. This is what we've created. Okay, so those yarn overs with yarn in front, you can see they're visible right there. And what we've done here is called the linen stitch pattern. So this is a stitch pattern that is relatively, I mean, it's fantastic. I've used it quite a bit. It's a nice dense fabric. I could probably knit a little bit tighter. I don't even know if I'm getting gauge here, but I was relaxed and having a nice time. But all you would do is repeat these 4 rows until this piece measures 14.5 inches. And then you would purl 2 rows and bind off. So you know everything you need to know right here for the body, and then you would purl 2 rows and bind off. And just in case people don't know how to bind off, I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's put on our imagination caps real quick and pretend that we just purled 2 rows. And all we would do for a bind off is you knit 2 stitches and have that back stitch jump up and over that front stitch. So knit 2 stitches, or knit 1 stitch after that, because now I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle, back stitch, jump up and over the front stitch. Knit 1 more stitch, back stitch, jump up and over the front stitch. You see how those stitches are getting bound off right there? All right, does that all make sense? I want to make sure everybody is clear. So we cast on 29, we purled 2 rows, we worked 4 rows of our linen stitch, and then we would repeat those 4 rows until it measures 14.5 inches. Okay, it says right here 14.5 inches or 35 centimeters. It says ending on a right side row, so you would end on a right side row, and then you'd purl 2 rows and then cast off or bind off, just like I showed you. All right, you with me so far? I think you got it so far. Okay, so once the base is done, there's the base right there, right? Once the base is done, that's when you would, I said 14 inches, right? Did I say 14 and a half? I meant 14. If I said 14 and a half, I'm sorry. I obviously can't read, but 14 inches, 35 centimeters. Once the base is done, that's when we'll cast on for the body of the tote. So with our circular needles, you would cast on 180 stitches, join in the round, being careful not to twist your stitches, and place a marker for the beginning of the round. So there's a question there. Does the 14.5 include the start? Yes, I would say completely, like the entire piece, the entire base should be 14 inches. Did I keep saying 14.5 again? I don't know why I have half in my mind, but can I grab a Kleenex real fast? All right. Okay. So here we are. I have already cast on stitches. Now, I did not cast on 180. I just did, I think I did 100 stitches. But I want to show you something. So I used the long tail cast on, just like what we did before. And so this is, let's put it this way. Here's the last stitch I cast on. And you notice I have markers in my work. And what I've done was whenever I cast on 20 stitches and then I placed a marker, and then I cast on 20 stitches and then I placed a marker, cast on 20 stitches, placed a marker, 20 stitches, placed a marker, 20 stitches, and then I have a marker. So the reason I put markers every 20 stitches, for me, it makes it so much easier to count so that I don't lose count. Maybe say I'm on 120 and I'm like, oh no, where am I? If I put a marker every 20 stitches, I can easily count 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and then so on and so forth. Does that make sense? And here's another reason why I love the long tail cast on. So once I get all of my stitches cast onto my circular needle here, you guys, you know that nice ridge that we create when we do the long tail cast on, that nice ridge? We can use that ridge to our advantage. So if you make sure that ridge is all nice and even to the inside of your circular needles, nothing is twisted around, you're looking at purl bumps. So as I set my needles down, I'm looking at purl bumps. I can see immediately that nothing is twisted. So when I begin to join to work in the round, I don't have to worry about anything being twisted. Make sense? All right, so that's another reason why I really like the long tail cast on. So I've cast on 100 stitches here. That's totally fine. I've placed a marker at the end of my needle to represent the start of my round. And you can get markers anywhere. There are videos on my YouTube channel on how to make markers. We're actually doing a marker event right now. And then all of the tools that you would need to make any marker are available at michaels.com. Trust me, you can get lost in the jewelry aisle, you guys, like bad. Just about as bad as you can get lost in the yarn aisle. Okay, once you get your stitches cast on, you've made sure they're not twisted. That's when we jump into the pattern. And so let's bring our pattern here. And let's see, we got to go to page 2. And I use markers all the time. If you watch me on YouTube, you'll know, like, I love markers. They're
Marley, before
yeah.
we hop into the body of the bag, there were just a couple questions about the linen stitch. Is there a version, or could somebody modify to where they were knitting instead of purling and get a similar effect?
Yeah, like you could be on the opposite side. So you know how we knit one and then slipped one with yarn in front, and then knit one and then slipped one with yarn in front, and then we turned it and then we purled all the way back. So you could switch that up, where if you were making it so you were slip one with yarn and back and then purl one, slip one with yarn and back and then purl one, and then knit the opposite side.
Awesome.
Yeah, you would just do the opposites of the stitches. Yep. You with me?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so the first and second rounds, notice these are in rounds now, we are going to knit, but the third and fourth round, we will be purl 4, slip 1 purlwise with yarn and back. So very similar to what we just talked about. Then it says repeat from star around. Okay, so that's what we do the whole round. Repeat these last 4 rounds. So once again, we're back on 4 rounds, and we do that for 14 inches. So the first stitch, the first round, wow, if I could talk. First round, we're just gonna knit. And I'm not doing anything special to join my round. I literally am just knitting into that first stitch. And if it becomes a little bit gappy here between these two, that's fine. I can close it up with my tail. I'm not worried about it at all. So right here, I'm just going to knit all the way around, knit all of my stitches. And if I want to, I can, on this round, remove those markers that I put into place to signify my 20 stitches, or I could leave them in place if I want them there. It's totally up to you. But as you're working on circulars, if you've never done this before, as you work these stitches, you sort of move them, and then you push up the stitches that you need to start working onto. And remember, I'm working on a fewer number of stitches right here. You would work on 180 stitches, but it's the same process. Also, as you're working around, notice that I have the needles like towards me right here, and I sort of have the stitches that are on the cord. They're away from me. Like, it's not like this. I'm holding it like this. And that's important, because if you hold it like this, all of a sudden you're going to be knitting on the inside, and so you're going to be knitting inside out. And so you want to make sure you're always knitting in this manner. So you always have the right side of the fabric facing you on the outside. Okay, so that's really important. That's always, whenever you're doing anything in the round, you always want to make sure that the public side of your work is on the outside of the fabric. Same thing if you're doing mittens, if you're doing socks, if you're doing a hat, anything in the round. That's one of the #1 mistakes people will make, is they'll say, Marley, I'm knitting inside out. I don't know what I did. And that's really just it, because it's such a simple mistake to make. But if you hold it in such a way that you are always looking at the outside of the fabric, you will be just fine. I'm going to remove my marker because I don't need it. I'm going to keep going. So as I knit around all of these stitches, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just knitting. So as I'm knitting, I think we should ask another question. Allie, do you have a question that you want to ask people?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot.
I am. And while you're thinking about it, I do want to remind people, because I saw a question pop up, the pattern is available. I think Michael's is going to have a link to the pattern, but it's also available on yarnspirations.com. So you can get the pattern, no problem. And the video is also getting recorded. So you can go back and watch this video also again.
Well, we definitely, there's people in here who are loving your stitch markers.
Aha.
So head over to marleybird.com and Marley
Yeah.
Bird's YouTube channel, because I know
Yes.
I personally have witnessed her whip out a whole bunch of stitch markers. She loves making them herself.
Well,
So
and here's what's cool. So my assistant, she's really more than my assistant, but Caitlin, let's see, I don't need that marker, but Caitlin is doing a stitch marker event right now where for 12 days, she's showing us how to make stitch markers in 12 different ways. So we have used a silhouette machine, we've used bead-along tools, we've used impress art, and all of these items are all available at Michael's. So if you are, I mean, we did glass fusing in the microwave, we did shrinking ink, we did resin. I mean, so many different ways to do jewelry for your knitting, so to speak. And so today we just did one on not wire wrapping, like wire work. We made some markers for knitting and for crochet, and it's so much fun. But yeah, you can get all the details on my website or on my YouTube channel. We have a lot of fun with stitch markers because I use them all the time, so I have to have a lot. I mean, literally, like, here's just a sample of my markers. And then conveniently, I got this little case at Michael's in the little dollar section, and I have it full of markers. So yeah, I like me some markers for sure. For sure. All right. Sorry. I know this takes a while. This is why I did not do 180 stitches. I was like, I'm going to do 100 so that way I can get through these stitches a little bit more. Did you think of a question for them?
I did. So
Awesome.
I would love to know, what is the first project that you made, and do you still have it?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So my first project, my first crochet project was actually a blanket for my then fiance, who we broke up. And when he asked for his ring back, I asked for my blanket back. So, because it had my very first stitches on it, but it was a queen size single crochet Navajo blanket, and it's awesome. But that was my very first project, and I have it. That was my first crochet project. My first knitting project, so if I am technical about it, my first knitting project was a scarf that I worked in basket weave. And the reason I did basket weave is because I was really trying to understand the difference between a knit and a purl and the construction of it and what was going on. And when I finally understood it, I was so tired of working on this basket weave scarf that I literally still have the scarf on the needles. And my mom found it when we moved here to Indiana. And so she wants to put it in a shadow box for me and frame it. So technically, I still have my first project, but it's not finished.
That is so sweet.
I know, right?
I saw, so there's Ronnie made a Barbie doll sweater, and that
Ooh,
is
cool.
absolutely adorable. There's someone in here who made as their first project. Way to go, Catherine. That is not something I could have accomplished as my first project.
Yeah.
At all.
All right, so I'm coming up to you and I want to show you something. See how it looks like it has a little bit of a gap there? That's totally fine and natural. I can pull on my tail a little bit. And then when I get to the end of my round, I slip my marker over and I just continue on. So this is where I would go to what would be my round 2, which would be another knit round. But because I don't want to just, how are we on time? You know what? I have time. Can I go ahead and knit?
It's 1:40.
All right, I'm going to just knit my next round just because we're supposed to. Why not? Let's hear more of your stories.
Some great stories in here. So a coin purse, a bag. Barbara said, so she got a book with 99 different knit patterns, and she made 63 of them.
Oh, wow.
In blocks for a Afghan for her mother-in-law. And she's not sure what happened to it at this point, but that sounds lovely.
Yeah. I can't believe somebody made a wedding dress.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
That's really amazing. I think my first completed knit project was a hat.
I think somebody just asked why I took off the first marker. I didn't. So like this marker here, that's the marker of my round. So I still have it in place. So I didn't take it off. So it's still there. All the other markers I took off because I don't need them. They were purely there to help me count. All right, keep going.
Oh, I was just saying my first project was a hat and I made it with like a jumbo yarn. And I was like,
Yes.
this was easy and I can do this.
I love that. You know, there's something about, especially beginner knitters or beginner crocheters, I think it's really important that you do something that's an instant gratification project, because you're spending all that time learning, and it's really mind I don't want to say mind blowing. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you know, you're giving your mind quite the exercise, right? And so you really want to see something that you have finished afterwards. And so I really feel like it's important to have those instant gratification projects, like a hat or a dishcloth or something very simple, especially for beginners.
I love there's a couple of people in here who made Barbie clothes as their first class, as their first
That's
project. I
awesome.
just absolutely love that.
That's awesome. Some people again were asking about the stitch markers. My website, you guys, it's just my name, marlybird.com. Marlybird, and all the supplies you can get those at Michael's. Just when you're at Michael's and you're gonna go to the yarn department, just stop off at the jewelry department and make sure you plan for like double the amount of time, because you will spend as much time there as you will in the yarn department. It's amazing. They've got quite a selection. Yes, I joined at the round in the very beginning. Somebody's asking, did I join to work in the round? Yes, right after I cast on. If you'll remember, I mentioned that we made sure that all of our stitches were not twisted. And then I just started knitting at the very start. There was no rhyme or reason, or no rhyme or reason. There's no extra step is the correct way to say that, to join in the round. I just started knitting literally the first stitch that I cast on. So it's pretty good. And as you're working around, you just kind of move the yarn as you're going. The first row, maybe the first two rows might be a little bit snug, just because you're trying to get the stitches all in place and moving correctly. Like, you know, they get a little bit of elasticity to them as they get knits. But it's pretty good. I don't know. As you get going, it gets pretty easy.
So we've had a couple people ask in here, they have had trouble with their cast off being too tight.
Okay. They're bind off.
Yeah.
So one thing you could do, so I'm going to pretend I'm going to bind off here. One thing you could do is, as you knit this stitch, when you go to have this stitch jump over, one thing that some people will do is they'll have that jump over and then they'll tighten that up real tight. So they've tightened up the stitch there and it makes it super snug. So you want to make sure that that still stays loose. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that's loose. Knit the next stitch and then bind off and make sure that's still a little bit loose. See how different that one is versus that one? Another thing you could do is, if you are a crocheter and a knitter, you could use a crochet hook to bind off, and you're essentially just slip stitching all of the stitches. You could do what's called a like a stretchy bind off, where you knit two of the stitches, and instead of having this one jump over this one, take your left hand needle and put it into the front leg of both of those stitches and knit them together. See that? So, and then I knit one more, put the left needle, the front leg of those two, knit them together. And that gives me a really stretchy bind off. So that's another bind off. There are so many different bind offs out there that you could choose to play around with. I also have some friends who will choose to bind off with a larger needle in their right hand. So they'll knit with a larger needle. So that way they don't have to worry about the stitches being too snug. So there's a lot of different ways to go about loosening up your bind off. But when you're binding off for that base, you really do kind of want it snug, because you don't want your base to be too loose, because it's the bottom of your bag. You know, you don't want the bottom of your bag too loose. All right, so I'm coming up to the end of my round, and I know that because my marker is there. I want to show you once again. It seems like it's a little loose. It's totally fine. Slip my marker. I can pull my tail if I want. And this is where I would jump in to row 3. So row 3 is purl 4. So we're going to bring our yarn between our needles to the front. Purl 1. 2, 3, and 4. And then it says slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back. Then purl 4. Bring our yarn back to the back, slip 1, and bring it up. And then we purl 4, so on and so forth. So as we're going through this, obviously the texture of this fabric is going to be different on the body of the bag than it is on the base of the bag. And we can see that too in our picture here. You can see that on the body of the bag, we do have all these pearls right here that are really, how do I say this? It's like we have our reverse stockinette and stockinette because we do 2 rows of pearls and then 2 rows of knits. So we get a lot of texture. So it's not just a linen stitch here. We get a really great textured stitch between these slip stitches because we're going to do 2 rounds where we're purling between these slip stitches, and then we do 2 rounds where we're just knitting, right? Because that's the repeat. That's it. This, I mean, you guys now know everything you need to know for the body of the bag. This is all it is. Oh wait, yeah, okay. Purl 4. You guys got all real quiet real quick. Everybody stopped asking questions. They're like, what is she doing? Can you see that? So these pearls here, as we do 2 rows of those, we are going to get a really great texture. Somebody asked if I could do it with the yarn in my right hand. Yes, I absolutely could do that. All right, so I just purled 4. So I'm going to bring the yarn between my needles. Oops. Between the needles to the back, slip 1 as if to purl, bring between the needles to the front, and then purl 4. Now, I am not very good at purling with the yarn in my right hand, so I'll do the best I can. But you always go over top of the needle, okay? That makes it so that the yarn rests on your needle appropriately, or I shouldn't say appropriately, but just the most standard sort of way if you're going to be knitting like this. Otherwise, it's a combination and it's a whole nother thing. All right, I'm talking and I'm not paying attention. I moved my yarn to the back. I slip a stitch as if to purl, yarn between my needles, bring my yarn to the front, and then I purl 4. And that's it. Isn't this like great? It's so easy. And you can just kind of keep going along. And what's awesome about this, as opposed to the base, is for the body of the bag, it's a repeat of that slip stitch. So you're not doing any, we're not staggering our slip stitches. They're all in a row. Okay, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I feel like I've gone over this enough. Like this, I mean, to me, this is enough for you to be like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, so then I keep doing this until it measures 14 inches, right? Does that make sense? Like I could go all the way around and then we do the same thing all the way around again. And then we go back to row 1, which was knit 2 rows. So it's just a combination of those 4 rows to get the body of the bag. Everybody with me on that?
Awesome.
You got that? I feel like that's good. Let me know. I mean,
just a reminder, everybody, I dropped the link here in the chat. That's where you'll be able to find the recording of today's class. It's michaels.com/classes. So that's where you can find recording of today's class as well as all of our previous classes.
Right.
And I will also redrop the link to the pattern in the chat here, just so that everybody has it fresh in case they're still missing that.
Perfect. So the only other thing to talk about now would be the straps. And the straps use the same stitch pattern that we used on the base. So the straps and the base are actually the same. They're just worked on a smaller number of stitches. So you're working back and forth again, but we know how to do these stitches still. So you start off, this is a slip 2 purlwise with yarn in back, and then knit 1, and then knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back. The last 2 stitches, knit 2. Slip 2 purlwise with yarn in front, purl to the end of the row. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty easy. The reason that you are doing these slip 2s, it's to give a nice clean edge along the edge of the strap right there. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take these stitches off and I'm going to cast on 13, and let's just kind of see how quickly we can get through all of this. You know what? I think I'm just going to cut this. Hey, here's a tip for you guys. If you ever feel like you're losing your scissors, make yourself a giant pom-pom and attach it to your scissors, and you will not lose them. I promise. And when you put them on, like, you're just like, oh, that's so cute. And then you grab it, like, there's my scissors. It's the best thing I ever did. Just saying. I mean, besides marrying my husband, that's probably the best thing I ever did. All right, so I'm going to cast on 13 right here. And so remember, your slip knot counts as one. You can, I mean, if you're one of those people that can start without a slip knot, fantastic. You could do that as well. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right. And that's the long tail cast on for those of you who are looking for instructions. I do have a very detailed slow motion video on my YouTube channel if that's something you want to get more instruction about. All right. So I'm turning my work and away we go. It says slip 2 purlwise with yarn in back. So my yarn is in back. I'll go into each of the next 2 stitches purlwise and slip them. Now it says that I need to knit 1. And now I'm doing my repeat. I knit 1, bring my yarn between my needles to the front, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. Between my needles to the back, knit 1, to the front, slip 1 purlwise. To the back, and remember, when I'm to the back, I'm always going between my needles. If you go over top of your needles, you're going to accidentally increase.
Marley,
Yes.
we have some questions here about putting the bag together.
Oh, okay. Yes. What would those be?
So I guess just how you would put together. Yep.
So, all right. So are we good here with the straps then, do you think? I mean, I feel like people would know how this goes. So let me come back to that. I'm going to answer about putting the bag together, but I'm going to turn because the whole slipping 2 might throw people off. Slip 2 purlwise with yarn in front. So this time I'm going to bring my yarn to the front and I'll slip 2 of them with yarn in front. And then I purl to the end. So I just purl these stitches. So other than that, I mean, you guys know how to do all these stitches, right? I mean, you're good there, but slipping, that's what it is. It's pretty simple stuff. Okay. That makes my life easier. All right. So let's take a look at this. So we have a base here that we will have separate. We have a tube and then we have straps. Now, for me, if I would have designed this, I would have picked up stitches around my base so that way I wouldn't have had to sew it. I don't know why the designer didn't do that. I mean, I could assume that maybe they wanted to have more of a structure and stability for the base to connect to the bag, which is totally okay and probably the real reason why. But all you would do is I would take the bag part and I would take the base and let me see if I can, let me try and figure something out here. If I were to, do I have a tube here? All right, work with me here on this. I know these are not what we're working with and one's crochet and one's knit, but let's say this is my tube. All right, so there's my tube. Here's my base, woo-woo. So here's my tube and my base. I could take my base, tuck it in just like this, and I would pin it in place. You guys know what I mean? So do I have pins? I mean, that's probably like the one thing I don't have are pins, right? I mean, but hey, you could use a stitch marker. Why not? So if I wanted to use a stitch marker, I could pin this with a stitch marker and do the same thing on this side. You guys see where I'm going with this, right? You could pin it all. And then I wouldn't overthink it too much. If you're a crocheter, you could crochet a single crochet or a slip stitch around here and have a really cool decorative outside. You could whip stitch it together. You could pin it like this and turn it inside out and make it so that this seam is on the inside instead of the outside. But essentially, I mean, that's what we're doing, right? We're pinning the base to our tube, okay? And then when the straps come, you would come up here, line them up where you go, and again, pin them in place and then whip stitch them together. It's really, it's that easy. There's nothing much extra to do. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm sorry guys. I know these are not, this is not the bag you're looking for, but hopefully this makes it understandable, because that's, I mean, there's a rectangle and a tube. That's what I have here. That would be kind of funny actually, but does that help?
Awesome. I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. Do you like, these are my whips. These are my, who knew that my works in progress would come in handy like this?
Oh,
Okay.
too funny. No, I think
know.
that's
Perfect.
super helpful.
Perfect.
Roxanne said, wouldn't you turn it inside out? I do think that was one of Marley's suggestions, that you could seam it inside out and then flip it back so that it's smooth. You could do something decorative. I like that idea.
Yeah. I mean, either way, if you want to go back to my face, because I'm done with the instructions here. But yeah, like, so for my little pin sample there that I did, obviously, I mean, I was showing you with it the right side, but you could turn this inside out and do the same thing and have it so it's all on the inside. It's, I mean, absolutely, you can do whatever you want. There are no restrictions for you when it comes to all of this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do you want to go back to my face? Do you want me to pin the video on my face? There you go. Hi. You're back to me. So yeah, I mean, that's really, it's pretty easy stuff. Don't overthink the whole sewing part, because excuse me, the Lily Sugar and Cream yarn is super sturdy. You can absolutely use this to seam up your project. You don't have to use any other type of yarn at all. This is not suggested in the pattern, but I have seen people who have actually used their sewing machine to seam things up, like they've turned it just like it was a knit bag or a sewn bag. You could do that as well. You could always sew a liner to the inside of the bag too when it's all done. I mean, there's so many options. Once you have the actual body of the fabric complete, you could add embroidery. You could add patchwork. I mean, there's so many possibilities. So this is like really a blank canvas for you. And the Lily Sugar and Cream yarn is washable. So it's a great beach bag. So you could take it out to the beach or to the market. I mean, anything. There's so many possibilities here for this bag. Hopefully you think so as well. Where are we at, y'all? How you feeling? You're on mute, my Allie friend.
Oh my goodness. I think we're doing great. There is just one question that I wanted to quickly get answered about increase or decrease suggestions for this bag to increase or decrease the size.
Okay, so you absolutely could do that. The repeat for the body of the bag is a stitch repeat of 5. So whatever you would do, just make sure you decrease it or increase it by 5 stitches. Also remember, whatever your dimensions of the base are, you would essentially have to do a gauge swatch, unless you're getting this gauge, you should do a gauge swatch of what you're planning on using. Figure out what the dimensions are around your rectangle. What would that be called? The area around your rectangle. And then say it's 40. And then you can figure out, okay, how many stitches do I need of my body pattern to go over 40 inches or the area of 40? And then you could increase it that way, because
awesome.
That's essentially what you're doing. And at that point, you're a designer. So then write up the pattern yourself.
And then just real quickly, some people are just concerned about they say that they're never able to secure the straps on tote bags securely. Do you have any suggestions on that?
When I add things to tote bags, so I usually will seam mine up I want to say triple, when it comes to straps, because I know that they hold a lot of weight. I've also used grosgrain ribbon and attach that around. So here's the fabric, here's my strap, and then I'll put grosgrain ribbon on the opposite side and stitch it around it, sort of to stabilize it even more. And sometimes I will use the grosgrain ribbon around the top part of my bag to add stabilization to the bag. Sort of the same thing. I do that on my shoulders of sweaters and stuff, because I'm a large woman. There's a lot of weight hanging on the sweater, right, as it hangs from my shoulders. So I'll use grosgrain ribbon around my shoulders and around the back of my neck to help support that weight. I mean, I often will joke around and say, you don't see a skyscraper built without support beams, right? So if we're building our sweaters or building a tote bag, we need that support. So the grosgrain ribbon actually can go in there and actually add that support. So you could do that. And it could be a decorative thing. I mean, get polka dots or something and make it look really cool. But that's a really great way for the straps. If you want to get really fun, maybe you don't make knit straps. You could always just buy like some leather ones or stuff. Make some straps, do bead straps. There's a lot of options out there when it comes to straps. But I mean, my biggest piece of advice is really just sewing them on really well and then using other items that you might have to help secure it in place. I like grosgrain ribbon because I think it's really pretty. I mean, tell me I'm wrong, guys. If you don't open your bag and you see like some polka dots or some stripes or something fun, I mean, it just makes you smile. Like, I love it. I think it's great. Linda agrees with me. I see Linda nodding. There you are. Yeah, she agrees with me.
Awesome. Well, I think this has been pretty much it. And thank you everybody so much for joining our class today. Just a reminder, you can find the recording tomorrow available at michaels.com/classes. And don't forget to check out michaels.com/online classes for all of our future classes. And thank you so much, Marley, for today.
Hey, thank you. And thank you for all of you out there who joined me today, especially I see a lot of Marley's minions out there. So I want to say hi. Thanks for your support. Absolutely. If you make this bag, make sure you share with us. Do #Yarnspirations, #MarleyBird, #Michaels. We would love to see your work and be able to smash your like button. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again really soon.
Awesome.
So much fun.
Marley.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.